Well, let's explore, let's take a journey, let's try to answer some questions. Creation in Symphony, the model. This model begins not with a space-time dimension, but this model begins with the Creator Himself. I've already expressed to you that leading thinkers have admitted, such as George Ellis, major publisher, major scholar, have admitted that the cause, the first cause, the source, the primary factor, all spelled with deity in mind, the cause of all that we see and experience and can observe in a physical space-time dimension is outside that space-time dimension. When we consider the possibility of God, can we identify that God? I think we can. I think we can do it academically, scientifically, as well as biblically. I mentioned a moment ago that the religions of the world have a common tenet in expression of their creator, deity, or deities. These deities are always found in conflict. Now that's extremely important. Class, understand that if we have created a religion, we will interpret the tenets of that religion in relation to our own experience. Thus, the created religions of the world, created by man himself, express the deity, superintending deity, often in plurality, often in conflict, and often having lived on planet Earth, then ascended to the skies, and thus have been deified. So we find an ingrained notion that literally a deification of man is involved. If those great leaders like Hercules, Dionysius, others known in classical studies, were men or human individuals, later deified, thus we will be deifying ourselves in interpreting all the cosmos in relation to them. Class, all of the great religions of the world and all of the great creation myths of the world fall into that category of sensuous self-preoccupation, disturbing conflict among the gods, and an exploit of the creation by that God. I say all of the creation stories except one. Notice in particular that in all of these stories, and there's a long list of creation myths, there's a long list of the pagan gods, some recognized culturally, some found out by anthropologists and sociologists as we examine extant and extinct cultural definitions. All of these deities, creators, and explanations for life origins sooner or later come to a concept of sacrifice. But the sacrifice of all of these concepts and all of these deities and religious entities involved what we would call murder, exploit, annihilation of an opponent, except one. There is one concept exclusively, uniquely, that qualifies in a dimension far beyond any of the man-made concepts of religion and gods. There is a revelatory concept of a God who did not exploit and take advantage of His creation, but instead, to redeem His fallen creation, gave Himself. Let's explore that wonderful avenue to see if this is the God of the universe. Well, first, let's examine the universe. We have this wonderful chart which has taken 30 years of research to be able to delineate into details and has been expressed in artistic design by Steve Miller, one of our consultants and associates. On this wonderful chart, we have the timeline of creation, but it begins at a time when there was nothing, absolute nihility, silence. Only God filled that silence, and expressed himself in it in a space-time dimension over which he, as a transcendent being, supervised the activities. Can we identify this God? Well, first of all, let's see what we find in the universe. As we observe the cosmic background, the stellar heavens, and planet Earth, and all that we observe in our personal experience, there is a system of knowledge that we've acquired, a systematic acumen, a body of data that we can observe. Now, this body of data has to do with the following. As we observe the universe, first of all, we see limitless space, unending time, in every warp and woof, perpetual motion, unbounded variety, infinite complexity. Let's look further. We see consciousness. We observe it in ourselves and in the creatures before us. We see feeling. We observe will. As we observe the practice of cultures of our generation and generations past, we find ethical values, religious values. As we look into the stellar heavens and observe the plants and insects, butterflies of earth, we see beauty. You find a system of justice, sometimes distorted, but a system is there. You find a recognition of righteousness, good above bad, right above wrong. You find an observation of love and life. Think with me, class. Since we observe these in our expressions of life, watch. The first cause of limitless space must be infinite in his own nature. The first cause of unending time must be eternal in duration. The first cause of perpetual motion must be omnipotent in power. The first cause of unbounded variety must be omnipresent in all that phenomena. The first cause of infinite complexity must be omniscient in intelligence. The first cause of consciousness must be personal. The first cause of feeling must be emotional. The first cause of will must be volitional. The first cause of ethical values must be moral. The first cause of religious values must be spiritual. The first cause of beauty must be aesthetic. The first cause of righteousness must be holy. The first cause of justice must be just. The first cause of love must be loving, and the first cause of life must be living. I submit to you that when you parade the pantheon of gods in ancient, medieval, recent, and current history, when you examine all the details of all the religions of the world, there is only one God who actually academically satisfies what we find as we observe the cosmos and our own experience in that cosmos. That is the God of the Bible. Thus we begin in Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God. The inference and direct statement reveal to us that as there was a beginning to the universe, there was not an oscillating cosmic egg. There is not a universe that sustains itself, it always has been existing, that will destroy itself and recreate its own self. It is not a cosmic oscillating universe. In the beginning, when there was a beginning, at the point God instituted that beginning, in the beginning, God. He was already there. In the beginning, God created the heaven, which is the space-time dimension. It's actually a plural singular in the Hebrew. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. With that sublime statement, the earth was without form and void, we have a tremendous revelation of the intent and purpose of that divine superintending God, the El Shaddai, the Elohim, the Jehovah Tsidkenu, the Jehovah Jireh, the Jehovah Shalom, who would reveal Himself in time to a material creation, to man made in His image, with all of those characteristics I've just listed in the actual names of the deity that He Himself revealed in time. That awesome and all-powerful, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient God created on day one the space-time dimension and simultaneously created the earth without form and void. It was simply a sphere of water. Now, by calling it earth, that means that He had futuristic intentions. He had design and purpose. By using water, we have the very nature of the life processes and the essential ingredient of life processes. For in water, you have an integration of hydrogen and oxygen. In water, you've solved a transmutation problem of the elements. Between elements 6 and 7 on the periodic chart, you cannot pass a transmutation, but here, creating element number 1 and element number 8, you have all of the futuristic possibility for the energy and elements to be transmuted to whatever the Creator would like to create in His design and His purpose. Back to the concept. In the beginning, God created the heaven, space-time dimension, and the earth was without form and void. It was simply a nebulous of water. Had we been there, we could have stretched our arm through the entire body and touched nothing but water. It did not yet have a shell form. That was not until day number 3 that we get the creation of the dry land. It was water without form and void. On day number 2, the Spirit of God will move upon that water in a special dimension. Later on day number 1, He will move upon that water and generate a sphere. In the beginning, God created the heaven, space-time dimension, and the earth. Current thoughts in astrophysics and quantum mechanics indicate that with a small structure of the earth, with the lines of space being curled, you actually have an integration of elements, mass, space, and energy as one. Now, we don't dare marry ourselves to a current concept in astrophysics or quantum mechanics because history has shown that you'll be a widow in the successive generation because all of these concepts pass with the using and are replaced with newer, more modern, more progressive concepts. But it is true that in the creation model, you have the space-time dimension called the heavens in plural and the earth as a sphere of water created, and that is plausible according to our current understanding of quantum mechanics. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. This is still day number 1. This is literal solar time. Later in this discussion, we will attempt to understand a measure of why we know that these were literal solar days involved, that the entire creation encompasses approximately 6,000 years. Yet, it accounts for the deep penetration of matter into space and accounts for the interpretation of billions, tens of billions of light years distance to the galaxies, to the stars, and the arrival of information transferred on light back to planet Earth. Stay with us. We're going to have a good time in this full journey exploring the cosmos and God's purpose in it.